Welcome to another episode of the Cocoa Podcast, a place where we amplify voices in the chocolate and cocoa industry in search for true sustainability. I am your host, Emma Rose. Today, we are diving into the world of cocoa farming. The process of making all chocolate starts there with the tree and the fruits, and getting an understanding of that process and how it ends up into the delicious food we eat is really important to understanding its value and making more conscious purchasing decisions as consumers. I'm super excited to be joined by an amazing guest today, Jeff Abella, who not only started a cocoa and coffee farm down in Cameroon, Africa, but also founded a bean-to-bar chocolate making and coffee roasting company here in the United States called Moka Origins. Jeff ties together the elements of the supply chain in a very ethical and transparent way. And today we're going to learn about what that process looks like. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you so much for being here today.
Emma, thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Yeah. All right, cool. So Jeff, tell us how you got started. What prompted you to first go to Africa, but then you decide to build a cocoa and coffee farm? How did that decision-making play out?
You bet. So originally, I'm from Madison, Wisconsin, and had a background in actually audio engineering, and ended up doing marketing and corporate audio work for a advertising recording studio. And it was really fun. Loved what I was doing, making a lot of good connections and kind of learning about small business management, but really felt a lack of kind of mission, and wanted that to be a piece in my like long-term kind of playbook as far as what I was going to spend my life achieving. And so I did what I think most people would do. I quit my job and liquidated everything, and I moved to Africa to start a cocoa farm. And
Wow.
and it was and at the time really easy. Actually, I was right out of school. I was in my early 20s. And my wife and I actually, before going to Cameroon, we ended up in Pennsylvania at a really great not-for-profit, which is where we live and work as well, called the Himalayan Institute. It's a meditation and yoga retreat center that also does international development projects in Cameroon, Mexico, and North and South India. And so we signed on as volunteers to work with Himalayan Institute, and we're part of their founding team in Cameroon to work with the community members within this community in Cameroon to start a range of programs. And it was really focused around education and health and women's empowerment at the time. And one of our kind of leading programs was a health program where we would actually grow the medicinal herbs needed to be manufactured into health products and then distributed. And so we started working with cocoa and coffee farmers that way. We're living in this beautiful region in the northwest part of Cameroon, up in the mountains, known for coffee rather, and then working in the lower elevations as well with cocoa farmers. And the whole time we were working with growing these medicinal herbs, and that was useful to the farmers because cocoa and coffee for them wasn't like a sustainable crop that provided them a living wage income. So they needed other crops to grow. So we started working with cooperatives to grow the medicinal herbs needed to process in our health program. And it was around that time when I really fell in love with coffee and cacao or cocoa, and really the agronomy side of it and the potential it had to create jobs. And I really fell out of love and kind of lost the taste for chocolate and coffee as well at that moment, from the standpoint of the commercial product and the commercial supply chain for those. And I just started questioning everything as we were, living in this community, spending about half of our time over there. And now this has been 15 years, and that's been our focus. So it's kind of like our second home. We renovated this beautiful coffee co-op and turned it into a community center on the bottom floor with a library, health center, and laboratory to manufacture herbs. And then the top is our kitchen and our home. But we started questioning how could, two things, coffee and chocolate, which feed billions of people around the world, not sustainably feed the farmers that grow these beans. And how could like chocolate even cost $1 or $2 on a shelf when so much energy goes into making these products? And then ultimately, like, what is chocolate anyway? So, here we are looking at varietals, climate, soil conditions, the agricultural conditions to grow coffee and cocoa, how the farmers are drying and fermenting, and how do those aspects lend themselves towards quality, and how does quality relate to value and ultimately compensation for them. And it was at that time we were bringing samples back to the US, having labs test them, talking to other coffee and chocolate makers to see if there's interest in being a part of this direct trade relationship that we were forging. And we actually fell in love with making chocolate on accident, I guess. We started making test batches right off of the farm that we had started in Cameroon. A little stone grinder, a small roaster.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. I was roasting in my shed about 100 yards from what is now our factory, and I finally outgrew my shed, and my wife I think kicked me out of the shed. Like, you've taken this too far. You need a bigger shed. So we restored this beautiful dairy barn in the Poconos, and it's on the campus of this not-for-profit of the Himalayan Institute, which is where we live and work as well. And yeah, we founded our roastery and chocolate factory, and the whole idea is to create a social movement using chocolate and coffee as the vehicle to create awareness around what these two commodities that we consume every day are, and what the value needs to be across the supply chain so that everyone benefits, especially the farmer. And so that was
Absolutely.
going from our not-for-profit work to agriculture, and really then organically kind of evolving that into craft chocolate and coffee.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, that honestly leads perfectly into the next question, which can you explain the journey from bean to bar? I think it's more labor intensive than a lot of us think. So what are the many steps along the way, and how does it all contribute to the final chocolate?
Sounds great. This is a really fun process, and it's a labor of love, really, because it is a big process. And I always say that the coffee and chocolate making process really starts on the farm. The farmer is the first processor of that product, and that's not often the kind of like stance that commodity cocoa or chocolate coffee makers see. But when the farmer is in that first step of the process and valued and understands what they need to do to achieve quality, then the outcome, meaning the product quality, is going to be so much better, and the market value will be higher. And it's like a win-win-win for the customer, the chocolate maker, and the farmer. So step one is really growing amazing beans. And I have a cocoa pod here I'll show you. Cocoa or cacao, and you can use those words interchangeably. In Cameroon, we're in the English region, it's cocoa. Some of the other countries we source from, it's cacao, but I'll call it cocoa. And so these cocoa trees are really amazing. They grow north and south of the equator around 15 to 20 degrees and need a lot of humidity, consistent rainfall, good soil conditions. They're very challenging fruit trees to grow. For example, on Moka Farm, we plant a tree with every product we sell. We just hit 100,000 trees planted, so we're super excited about that.
Wow.
But it is a long-term process. We're taking cocoa pods that are fresh, taking the seeds out, germinating those, and then for 4 years caring for those in a small nursery, and we call it our mother garden, but until it grows into an established tree and starts producing pods. Once it produces pods, this is what they look like. This is actually a real cocoa pod. It's dehydrated so that isn't it cool? It looks like a football.
So what's the color on these when they're fresh?
They're amazing. Yeah, the colors are like purple, green, orange, red, yellow. My daughter, who's 7, and we have so much fun walking through cocoa farms together, but she always says it looks kind of like a real live Christmas tree. It's just like dramatic and bright, really beautiful trees. What's awesome about cocoa, in my opinion, I think it's really unique, that if this was the trunk of the tree, unlike an apple where the fruit is going to grow on the branches, the cocoa really grows mainly on the trunk of the tree. And it starts with a little white flower and blossoms into what kind of looks like a pickle. And then for a few months, it grows into like this little football. And it's a tree that's very susceptible to fungus, not very drought resistant either. So you need steady rainfall, if not irrigation. We teach a lot of irrigation practices in Cameroon. It's part of our farmer field school that we run. And it's also not very pest resistant. There's a lot of pest problems. So farmers are already vulnerable when they're growing cocoa. And the process after harvesting is kind of like step one of quality. You need to ferment. So you harvest the cocoa pod off the tree by cutting this off. Then you break this apart. And inside you have a white, fruity, kind of a mass. I'll call it like a, kind of like when you cut open a pumpkin and you have like the pulp and all these little seeds. It's very similar. And that fruity pulp needs to ferment under really warm conditions so that the seeds will develop the right flavor. And this is like a very simply stated part of the process. We could spend a few hours just talking about fermentation, but generally what's happened.
How long does that take to ferment it?
Yeah, about 6 to 7 days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it can depend on like the region that you're in. Depends on the heat. Depends on the kind of fermenting they're doing. If it's in boxes versus in like jute bags or banana leaves. And we've seen it all from good quality, consistent and thorough fermentation to, we've seen that step skipped altogether because farmers are not really aware of the quality, or if they are, it might not bring them any value if they properly ferment it anyway, because their buyers don't care and they just want to move that cocoa out the door and earn money from it. So, but it can take 4 to 7 days. And what's generally happening is that fruit is breaking down and is creating acid, mainly acetic acid, and it's that white pulp will drain away, and you're left with these cocoa beans, which I'll show you. These little seeds. Let's see if my camera will focus a little better here. Here, there we go. So
nice.
These little seeds, and they look like almonds. After they're fermented, though, they're red, and then they need to be dried for another 2 to 4 days, sometimes even longer if there's a lot of humidity. For example, in Cameroon, our main harvest is in the peak of the monsoon season. So it's really tough because here we are trying to dry a vulnerable, it's like a soft commodity. It's still a little vulnerable, and it needs to get to a certain moisture level before it molds. And we're harvesting in this like peak rainy season. I mean, the ambient humidity is 90%. It's just wet everywhere. So we're having a lot of fun experimenting with ways to capture heat using like greenhouse style tents and move that moisture out. Anyway, the next step then is drying. And after that, that is the commodity, the cocoa that's really ready to be shipped and turned into chocolate. And if what we found when we were testing beans, we were making chocolate right off our farm and buying from our friends. We made some awful chocolate in our early years as we were testing fermentation. And it was so clear that when the fermentation and drying and ultimately the bean quality is high, you can make some amazing chocolate. And when that's the case, the product will taste better, and we should be paying more for that as consumers, and the farmer should be earning a good take of that additional earning. And so we just really fell in love with that. Even if we're not in the business of like new genetics or let's say doing anything different on the chocolate making side, if we could just teach farmers or participate in helping farmers get value out of better fermenting and better drying and link them to chocolate makers that want that fine flavor, then it's just a great way for farmers without spending any additional money to start earning more from that bean. And so that's how Moka Farm really started. And that's the process one, I'll call it, like bean harvesting, fermenting, drying of chocolate making. The next step, though, we'll get into kind of the fun, creative part, is taking this bean and, turning it into a chocolate bar. It's a tough process for a small batch maker to do. When I first started, it's just like everything now. We're like Googling and YouTubing. And luckily there's, generous people out there who have shared their knowledge. I'm trying my best now to share what I've learned, but chocolate making is tough for a small batch maker because the equipment that's available for chocolate making is really expensive and kind of catered towards big volume commercial production. So small batch chocolate making equipment, we kind of had to make a lot of it. For example, our roaster, which is step number one to roast these beans. We're using a coffee roaster, which has been amazing. It's still expensive, but it was an approachable way, without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. We still spent tens of thousands to get a roaster that can remove the moisture, properly develop flavor, give us airflow variable control, agitation of the drum so that we're able to use the convection and conduction way of heating. So that was step one, is really roasting. The next step is getting this open. You can hear this. And
oh wow.
And then getting this shell. Let's see, this is the shell. And Emma, once you can visit in person, we'll make some awesome chocolate together. That would be super fun.
Oh my gosh,
You'll,
yes.
Please. I think you're gonna love the creative process here. And that goes for anyone listening. We have a beautiful retreat center, about 100-room capacity right on our campus. So we have a chocolate factory and this beautiful retreat center on a 400-acre nature preserve. So it's a really cool way to spend the weekend if you're in the Pocono region. But we have this husk or shell, and then inside we have these cocoa nibs. So that is nibs. Kind of yeah, exactly. So that's the step to making the first ingredient, which we now use to make chocolate. And we'll already spend several days just getting to this point where we're first sorting the beans, roasting those beans, and then crushing them, and then what we call winnowing, which is separating this shell from these nibs. A fun thing to talk about quickly, since your business is really revolves around high quality and origin specific flavor. Mm-hmm. Every bean tastes different. So like our beans that come and we make our Uganda bar with are going to taste very different than I think the bar you're tasting, which is the bar from Ghana.
The bar, yeah, I've been snacking on this all day. I have the bar from Ghana and Tanzania also, and it's insane the difference in flavors that you get. And actually, I have a question about that. Does that have to do more with the type of chocolate that is grown or the environment in which it grows?
Both. It has to do with kind of all of that, both the kind of bean, so the kind of cocoa bean, the variety. Just like if you think of an apple orchard, you have like Red Delicious, McIntosh, and Granny Smith, and yeah, they're all apples, but they all taste very different, right? Same with cocoa. So you'll have different varieties of cocoa, and they'll all taste different. But then also the region, the terroir, like the climatic and environmental conditions will influence the flavor potential of that bean. And then third, too, the handling. So how it was cared for when it was growing, but really how it was cared for when it was fermented and dried. And then we get into the chocolate making, how we roasted it. So you set me up perfect to talk about the differences there. The Uganda bean and the Tanzania bean taste very different because they're very different beans. So the chocolate is going to be dramatically different, and it'll take us a while on the roaster. And sometimes it takes us months, kind of depends on how much we're putting into it as far as time. But it'll take us, months to dial in that roast profile, meaning the amount of heat, the amount of time, the amount of airflow, just to perfectly kind of draw the best possible flavor qualities from this bean.
So versus like the Tanzania. Every bean is different and needs to be roasted differently.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, every bean has its own, we call it a roast profile, and then the way it winnows is a little different, and then the way that we stone grind it. So but we could take the Uganda bean and roast it a certain way, and then roast it a completely different way, and you would taste a dramatically different chocolate. So the roasting step is, I would say, okay, aside from like bean quality is like the first most important step, and then the second is roasting. That is a step where you could really make it or break it as far as your chocolate. Right. So So we're very nerdy, and we love roasting. We're constantly talking about volatilization of acetic acid and airflow and all these fun things on how to get chocolate to taste how it does.
That's
And then
awesome.
same goes for coffee as well. So next step though, so we have cocoa nibs. You saw these little crunchy nibs. You can either eat these, which are super nutritious and delicious. But that one, like banana, that's just really good.
Wow, I wish I could
It's
try
like
one.
Yeah, I'll send you some beans. You just break them open, and it has like a banana chocolatey. It'd be really good in like a banana nut muffin or something like that. So,
Yes.
so next step then, take that cocoa nib and stone grind it. So we have these stone grinders, which are basically big bowls that spin, and inside the bowls, there's two literally granite stone rollers, and the base of that bowl is also granite. So as that bowl spins and that base is spinning, these rollers are also spinning, and the cocoa nibs are passing underneath those stone rollers and pulverizing. They're just turning into a liquid, because about 50% of this cocoa nib is actually a liquid called cocoa butter. So like if you were to take this and chew it up or mash it up with a hammer, that's essentially making chocolate. You're going to start to get the oil that's inside there to kind of come out. And so when we stone grind, we put this in our grinders rather, usually about 3 days, and they just spin. And these are big machines now, but we can do about 500 chocolate bars per grinder at a time. And yeah, it takes about sometimes 4 days, but 3 to 4 days of grinding to get the chocolate really creamy.
Wow.
And that's also where we put the sugar in. It's that same step. We put the sugar into those grinders as well.
That's really cool. And
Yeah.
how do you separate so when you make white chocolate, you want to separate out the cocoa butter, right? How does that work?
Yep. Awesome. So white chocolate, exactly. You want to take the cocoa butter that's in here out. We don't have the machine to do it yet.
Okay.
But what you do is you take this cocoa nib, you need to mash it up a little bit, and you use like a hydraulic press. And this press, it's like 10 or 20,000 pounds of pressure, will squeeze out the cocoa butter. And it's like this beautiful liquid. I mean, you've seen cocoa butter. It's white or clear. And so what you have then is the separation of the clear cocoa butter, and what's left behind is cocoa powder. Cocoa powder is often used in commercial pantries or
right.
Yeah, for baking, right? And then the cocoa butter is either used for us, like we'll take that and we'll add it back to chocolate to make it even more creamy, or we'll make white chocolate with it.
Okay.
But a lot of times commercially, it's used in like cosmetics, like a lot of lip balms and other things have the cocoa butter in it. And then the cocoa powder is almost like the byproduct. So what we love is that our chocolate actually doesn't separate it. We're taking the cocoa nib, which has the cocoa butter in it, and of course the cocoa solids, cocoa powder, if you will, and we turn all of that into chocolate. So you should taste the difference in that the cocoa butter is still present in our chocolate, and it'll just have a really nice creamy consistency and a good melt, which we like, because we also don't add lecithin or emulsifiers like you can use like a soy lecithin or a sunflower lecithin. Since we don't use that, we need as much cocoa butter as possible already in our chocolate, so that the viscosity is nice.
Right.
So yeah, making like simple ingredient bean to bar chocolate is tough, but ultimately the flavor outcome and our satisfaction for the clean nature of the product, I guess that's what we get in return. So so we grind the chocolate up, and what we then do is pour it out of those big grinders, and we like to let our chocolate rest. Some people call it aging or sitting. I've heard all kinds of things. Consider like aging. Okay, so we pour the chocolate out and we let it age for we try to let it age for 1 to 3 months. Kind of depends on how busy we are, but we will in that aging process, you'll kind of notice some things evolve. You'll notice that the tannins, some of the acid, some of the bright notes or maybe the bitter notes, they just kind of settle down a little bit. The chocolate kind of normalizes and rounds out, if you can imagine that in like a flavor descriptor. It just kind of mellows out. And I found that after like 3 to 6 month old or rested chocolate tends to just be a little bit easier on the palate, especially for beans that have a lot of acidity, which some of the best chocolates do, because that's where you're getting that fruity. Oh, like the Tanzania bar you're eating, it has a really fun, I think like a cherry, I almost think like a malted cherry quality. So that cherry note is actually acetic acid that's present in the bean, which happens from the fermentation on the farm. So we don't want that flavor to go away, but what we want to do is make it softer so that it's not like eating vinegar essentially,
Right.
because that's what that is. So yeah, so that's the aging process. And
that's cool.
then we melt the chocolate again and we pour it into chocolate bars. So we have plastic food grade polycarbonate molds and a tempering machine and some very dedicated people to doing this. And my team is just amazing. So I can't wait for you to come and meet them. But they hand pour like every bar. So, hundreds of bars a day, they're just depositing into the molds. And then they go into basically a refrigerator that has extra airflow and some humidity controls. And for about 30 minutes, that liquid chocolate in those plastic molds hardens. And because it's tempered, which means the crystals within the chocolate have taken a different shape, it will then contract and you'll have this nice shiny chocolate. And you'll have different kind of a quality with tempered chocolate, a better quality than you'll have with untempered chocolate. And so listen, for example, you can kind of see the shininess. I don't know if any of you have ever like had a chocolate that, maybe it was left in your car or your purse or outside, or maybe just in direct sunlight on your counter and it melted. So you put it in the refrigerator to like harden it up or put it in your cabinet. And then you took it out and you realized it had like a white kind of color to it. That's the cocoa butter rising to the surface. That's called bloom. It's not bad. It's not mold, but it was mistreated. So like never do that again. And it's still good. And so this is what we're going for though, that shiny chocolate with this good snap. Hear that?
Satisfying.
And then exactly, yeah. and then the melt. So yeah, and then we hand wrap everything in foil. And we paper wrap everything as well.
Cool. Your packaging is really cool also. So does, you have on there, the mission, and then you talk about the farms, the variety of bean, the regions that it came from. So all of the cocoa beans in here all come from that region, or do you ever mix? It's very single. No. Okay.
It's all single origin. Yeah. We don't do any blends yet. I think it would be fun. And if we did, we would also be sourcing from single origin farms and then letting people know this bar has a blend of this bean and this bean. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We don't do it. We just haven't gotten there yet. Plus I really love how the chocolate tastes on its own. And I personally love like being able to taste the different countries or origins and differentiate them.
Yeah, it's a fun experience for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite, Emma?
I've got to say the Ghana bar is my favorite. I love the more fudgy, not bitter, but kind of bitter, like, I don't know. I guess I love the fruity. I think it's really interesting, but I just don't associate it as much with chocolate. And so for me, like, I'm kind of a sucker for that darker flavor. And so do you know why that is? Like, is Ghana, or I know that's right next to Ivory Coast too. Do those have a different flavor, say, than Cameroon? Because Cameroon is close too, right?
Cameroon's close too. Yeah, my 4 favorite like West African cacao beans and chocolate all have a very kind of similar quality as far as like dark, brooding, like well-rounded chocolate. Not very fruit forward, but more like almost like the edge of a brownie pan, like that really
Yeah.
good classic chocolate. And I love that. The Ghana is really fun. It has uh, not a little astringency, but it's not overpowering. And yeah, it just has a really nice classic chocolate flavor. Cameroon is very similar,
Okay.
except it has like a slight cherry note. I wonder if I have one here. I keep this stash kind of tucked away. It's a rare bean as far as a good quality bean. And yeah, it has a really fun malted cherry, almost like a dark cocoa powdery kind of flavor. And then beans that we use from Sierra Leone also have that. They're a little bit more earthy. That could just be like a quality of the bean or the handling or the age of them, but they have that. And then I really like, our Ivory Coast too. It has almost like a graham cracker, like nutty note. But anyway, point being is they're not really on like the fruity floral end of the flavor spectrum. They're more like on the kind of chocolatey nutty end.
Right.
And yeah. Where's the Ghana? Yeah, isn't it like the potential? The Uganda though, it's from Africa, but it's got this like bright apricot-y kind of note. So
yeah, that's super cool. Cool. What is your biggest area of curiosity right now, like in the chocolate or coffee?
Yeah, for me, it's how to like have this mega shift happen where chocolate doesn't stick in this category as a candy. And how can we shift that to where, and there's nothing wrong with candy, but the value of it is low, or value perception of it. How can chocolate have a shift where it becomes a food, just like a specialty cheese or a wine or a bread? The value to make it is high, and the value perception on the market is low, and there's a disconnect. And I think that if chocolate is going to continue to be valued low and ultimately earn little money, which is going to result in low paid farmers, I'd almost like to see it just like not be a thing and go away. It's almost harder on humanity than it is positive when you're working so hard for no profit and ultimately trapped in this cycle of quantity, no quality. And there's so many layers of the supply chain, and you're like trapped underneath all of them. And I didn't understand this as a consumer, and I didn't really think the effects of this broken supply chain were that massive until I started living and working with community members who were like underneath this reality. And so I would love to see, and ultimately what I want to achieve through like amazing partners like yourself, is find a way to educate consumers that you taste the difference in that chocolate. That's really unique. Here's the story on how that flavor nuance came to be and why this is a little bit more expensive. Because the bean quality was higher, the farmer was paid sustainably. It's a win-win for everyone, and ultimately you're going to taste the difference. So yeah, I think I would love to see a shift for quality and higher compensation versus like quantity and unfair living wages for farmers.
Right. I love that. Your company does a lot of really cool things, but if you had $1 million to expand on any project, how would you use it? What do you think is making the most impact?
Yeah. I think if we had that kind of capital, it would be on awareness, and I won't say sales, but it would be on like distribution end of it. And it would be a big investment to put towards doing what we're currently doing even better as far as consumer education, and trying to find like large quantity opportunities for high quality fair trade cocoa, because the volumes do need to exist. So when I say like let's get away from quantity, I don't mean like the more quantity of high quality, that's what's going to win.
Yep.
So I would like to see, a lot of money be put towards finding a specialty, increasing the specialty chocolate segment in grocery, and ultimately it has to start with consumers' interest. So just consumer awareness around how like chocolate is devastating currently.
Yeah.
We could change the face of humanity and over the course of like a few years across thousands of people quickly if we shifted our consumption and our awareness on how we think about chocolate. So yeah, probably consumer awareness and finding good markets, because another reality is that there's maybe 100 or 200 small batch chocolate makers in the US. We're all really great people and want chocolate farmers to win, but is there enough consumption to really support the amount of chocolate that we're now putting into this market? Not really, if we're going to be competing with like $1 or $2 or $3 bars of like commodity chocolate. So I think there needs to be a lot more work done to create opportunities for this good quality, higher value chocolate to have a market access for.
Right. I think a lot of people are kind of waking up to that. I know, fair trade's been around for a long time, and people understand that the reason for that is because some chocolate is not super ethical. But it's definitely been a challenge to really get that, or I guess shift people's consumer behaviors.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, fair trade's done a lot for like waking up consumers to the issues.
Yeah.
The fair trade model like isn't perfect either, though, and we won't get into that. That could be an awesome follow-up podcast, though.
For sure.
Like how to improve fair trade, and maybe that's where the $1 million would be used. But it's a really good start, and it woke me up to just when I read something like fair trade, it gets me thinking, and it gets me understanding the challenges. So yeah, and I think as far as that $1 million question, there's a lot of kind of as an entrepreneur, I'm constantly thinking about different business opportunities. Most of them are like geared towards social projects. And so I have a lot that I would like to see happen in Cameroon and some of these other project sites that we work in. And those are, bringing the manufacturing closer to origin, a value addition there. We run a lot of cool small micro enterprises in Cameroon, and I would love to do more. I would love to do more around agriculture and take what is now like a raw ingredient being exported out. What if the processing and manufacturing could happen there? The value addition could happen there as well, and people at origin would earn more. So, $1 million wouldn't go a long way with me, but I would love to see it put to use there. On the US side here, I just think, consumer awareness is something that we got to shift. And, your shop is perfect for this. You have Rosie's Confections, you have an opportunity for people to walk in. You're going to have 5 minutes, maybe 20 minutes with everyone for them, whether it's even just like seeing something on the wall or like an infographic or telling them the story about who you source from, or maybe the farmers that you've met. You're going to wake up so many people through your one-on-one interactions. I would love to invest in that. And I think that's awesome from the standpoint of you're going to be kind of like the torchbearer to wake up consumers. You're also then going to plug them right into a purchasing decision that's ethical. So that's great. I would love to do that even greater than we're currently doing in our current chocolate factory, having a more physical retail presence with our chocolate factory cafe kind of model. But how do you do that, at scale is kind of the question. And so, yeah. Great question.
Oh, that's a great answer too. Yeah. Wow. Those are some really cool ideas. I love the idea of building a factory or building more factories at the countries of origin, because I can only imagine, like right now, so much of the supply is going to these giant chocolate or cocoa processing facilities. I can't even picture the magnitude of it, but there's so much chocolate, like all the big cocoa companies. None of these factories are in the countries of origin, right? Like these giant, I know there's like a few small ones.
the scale is so massive, it's hard to wrap your head around.
But I can't even.
And yeah, and forget about manufacturing at origin for a moment. Even if though those mega companies who are exporting shiploads of cocoa, they're not even putting them in the jute bags. They're not even putting them into containers. There's so much bean. They're literally blasting them through like cannons, filling the bottoms of ships. Like it's mega trade. If the percentage compensation was increased just by a few percent, like the impact on human life as far as farmers earning a living wage income would be so significant that it could really help to reduce poverty. So
Yeah.
Manufacturing at origin would be really cool. It kind of depends on, can that product then be sold at origin, or is it shelf stable enough, or can it be transported or in a way that's not going to jeopardize the quality. Anyway, but if there's consumer interest within that country and the company they can afford it, then that's awesome. But even if the compensation for those beans just went up 0.5% or a few percent, the impact is significant. So I think it's worth a shot. And can I ask you a question, Rosie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or Emma, I'm sorry, about Rosie's Confections.
Good. Yeah.
Cool. So what was your first, when did you realize you wanted to start working in chocolate?
So that's a good question. So I've had a culinary background ever since I was a kid. I've always loved making pastries, and throughout university, I worked at a bakery. So that's always been a passion of mine. I used to love making gourmet cakes, and I'm really into the dessert, but making beautiful art with food. And chocolate, it wasn't something I considered until 3 years ago. I walked into one of the Newhouse shops in New York City. I don't know if you're familiar with Newhouse. They're a Belgium chocolate company. And I just walked into the shop and was just blown away by the level of artistry and creativity that goes into making confections. They have all the different colors, like different flavors, and just the experience of buying that and then leaving with a box and then trying some and having it just taste so good. I was just blown away by the experience, and I was like, this is something I could get into. And then I started making chocolates for my dad. I started making CBD infused chocolates, because a lot of the CBD infused edibles that were around had a lot of preservatives and high fructose corn syrup. And I mean, we were never behind the idea of mixing medicine with poison. So so I started making my own stuff and experimenting with that then. And that's really, I really fell in love with that medium. It's just really fun to work with, learning how to temper and all of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like art and science.
Yep.
And then the experience that comes out of it is incredible.
Delightful for everyone.
For the consumer.
And and definitely when I started my business and I started, really researching my industry, researching, where my ingredients were coming from, because I've always, wanted to be thoughtful about what I like, the product I was making and how that was affecting everyone. I started realizing there was really a darker side that I had no idea about. Chocolate before was like a fun food really for everyone, and then I realized that there are a lot of farmers that struggle because we get to enjoy this as a commodity, I suppose. So then I became very curious and started learning more and really realizing that chocolate is a luxury. And and I mean, it all led me to here during this campaign and starting a podcast. So, really trying to start a conversation about this and talk about it more in depth with people. So
Emma, that's awesome. That's an incredible story. And it's amazing what can come from that first starting point of just getting the conversation started,
right.
and the empowerment potential behind engaging in a dialogue that needs to happen.
Yeah.
So, and what better like context for it to be than chocolate, because everyone's into it.
I know.
So, so you have our attention. Yeah.
Chocolate. Someone said chocolate.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. No, I'm so excited to see where this is gonna go. And honestly, that about wraps it up. Is there anything else that you want to share that we maybe didn't get to about cocoa farming?
Well, yeah, chocolate is a food that comes from a fruit that was hand cared for. So we should do our job as consumers and make sure we're mindfully choosing what chocolate we consume. That's the bottom line, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeff, so much for.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma. This has been a really great opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. I'm so proud to meet you and your shop, and I can't wait to visit in person and order online too. And I'm excited about the chocolate and coffee that you're gonna have available. So.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Really excited to work together. All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Emma.
Have a good one.
Cool. Yep. Take care.